We never know when it is our time to pass away. And that became even more aware just recently as my 15-year-old niece passed away from a viral infection rather suddenly. And super sad. She loved Jesus. We know she's in a happy place and we miss her a lot. But today we're going to talk about just, Ariel's example of a life worth living. She was just living an abundant life and we can all learn from her. So we're going to talk about 4 points of a life worth living and enjoying. And the first one is living life to the fullest. It's interesting, if Ariel had known she was going to pass in the last 2 weeks, her life wouldn't have looked any different. She had the most magical time in Florida celebrating her 15th birthday and just had sweet time with her friends and her family. And it was just very beautiful. She was intentionally adding enjoyment to her life. And really, that's something, just embracing the small things in life, embracing just the little things like, it's springtime and summertime and we can start seeing the changes in nature and letting us that create joy in our lives is wonderful. Just those small things, one thing at a time. Also, by reducing our trauma load, we can increase our joy, because when we're not willing to feel our feelings and feel the negative stuff, then we can't actually feel the joy. It kind of chops them off at both ends. And so doing the work behind our traumas and working with those stories that can hold us back, maybe we have belief systems of we're not enough, we're not good enough, smart enough, we don't, all of those things, those can hold us back from experiencing life to the fullest and joy in life. My husband recently shared with me that he didn't realize that the trauma he had gone through could be fully redeemed by God. And he thought he always had to live with it and somehow cope. And I don't think that's true. I think that our suffering is never wasted. We've all gone through things, some really crappy things. And I just believe Jesus and God and the universe do not want to waste any of our suffering. And if we use that and allow it to be redeemed, it's really our golden diamonds that help us help others or help us live brighter because of what we've gone through. So it can either bring us down, or it can be a tool that actually brings us up and helps others, because all of us have really suffered. And there's many people that have gone through things that you've experienced and I've experienced, that when we share our stories and have, worked with our stories, we can be a great source of healing for them and support. In something about living to the fullest, we always have to remember we are God's favorite, each of us. He doesn't pick favorites. He thinks we're all favorites. And so really just embracing how much God loves us and sees us, that can help us live life to the fullest as well. And then just looking at ways, to work through our healing and stuff like that, and looking for God's guidance in that. Because there's so many, I've talked on this podcast about different ways we can, help with our traumas, whether it's ourselves or a specialist. And there's all sorts of different ways of working through it. But really, you are the one that knows what's best for you and the best source of your healing. And so really just finding out and listening to your heart and choosing to pursue it and being willing, and then that's what's going to be right for you. But just know you are fully loved. I used to always say to my kids, throughout the ages, you're my favorite 7-year-old, you're my favorite 5-year-old. And obviously it would change every year because they were all my favorite at whatever age they were at. And that's how God sees us. We are his favorite. So live life to the fullest, number 1. Number 2, live a life of love. I just think it's so sweet because Ariel had just reached out to her siblings and was really close to her older siblings. And she just told her mom how thankful she was for her. And again, it was quite the surprise that she passed, but it was her time. And it was just such a good reminder for me to forgive my siblings more, and I thought in a lot of ways that I had. And it was interesting to kind of realize, I've forgiven them, but I only let them into my life to a certain degree. So realizing how important it is to open my heart more. And then also I realized, I can express more love to my kids. I love my kids, but I don't always, because they're not the most huggy kids in the sense that they're all like young adults. And some of them are just not huggy. And so I always want to respect that, but also, I want to tell them I love them more. And I want to say, hey, can I give you a hug? And kind of, press them just a little bit and just express my love for them more. So it was really good to show me like how in areas in my life where I need to live a life of love, which involves also deeper levels of forgiveness and understanding and freedom. So that was a great example to me of how Ariel was living her life. Our emotional cups can get full without us really even being aware of it. But when our emotional cups get full, we can react rather than respond. We can be fatigued. We can feel burdened. We have struggle with sleep. We can have physical symptoms. And that's why I have the free Barf Notebook page for you. And it's a simple process done regularly where you're barfing out your thoughts, sorting them out, and planning them out. And it's a wealth of healing in that. So go ahead and check the link and have access to that free Barf Notebook process. Live brighter every day. The third thing is to live in a life of congruence with yourself. And gosh, that's so huge. Being honest about who we are. It's so lonely if you're not being who you are, or if I'm not being who I am, and I'm trying to be loved for the persona that I'm giving off. Because I'm being a people, that's people pleasing. And it's very common to get into like we have to behave and be a certain way in order to be loved. But that's not real love. Like really being loved is to be like known for who we are and loved. And being honest, a lot of us have a hard time being honest about who we are. And the most common regret for older people at death, is that they did not live a life being honest and truthful about their hearts, and they were rather being people pleasers. And so this is a chronic reminder for me because I naturally tend to go that way. And I intentionally work to not do that and to really listen and be honest about who I am, what I think, what matters to me, about my beliefs and what I want. And it's okay if people are not okay with that. So it's very freeing to be known for who you are and very soul draining to put on a persona but not being honest about who you are. I think it was really interesting. I have a counselor that I enjoy seeing, and he was telling me a story about a pastor in our community. This was a while ago that had committed suicide. And he left a letter because he was kind of well known in the community, and he had just developed such a persona that he wasn't choosing to be honest or feeling like he could be honest about who he was and what his struggles were. And that is like soul sucking and soul draining. And it was sad to see that he passed from that, and a great reminder for us that it's very toxic for us to do that. And so just living a life in congruence with yourself. It was fun because Ariel was at 15, she was awkward and goofy, and she just was always that way and just embraced it and just was who she was. And I just love that about her. The fourth thing is to live a life of intentionality. Life can just go ahead and go by us, and before we know it, we're in places and situations and we're not happy with things. And so really ownership is huge. And I find this so important in my own life. And I'm chronically like, oh, wow, I'm not taking ownership of that. So just owning my part of the challenge and owning every situation and being like, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. And what am I not wanting to tell myself? I remember I received a Instagram comment about we lie to ourselves. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely lie to ourselves. There's things we're trying to keep from ourselves. And this is partly the way we're wired. Like our bodies would rather give you physical pain sometimes than have you feel the emotional pain, because some reason our brains think that it's harder for us to work through the emotional pain. And so it'll distract us with the physical pain. And it's very interesting how it does that. But really feeling our feelings and listening to what our feelings are telling us and following the breadcrumbs is so important. And I've really had to do this in my own life recently with my different business. I have 2 businesses, and just looking at that and having an honest conversation with myself, which is great because I listen to my own podcast because I need to be reminded of these things. We're on this journey together. And so where in your life do you find that you're not owning or being honest about what you're thinking, feeling, and experiencing? And where have you not taken ownership of your life? Where have you made excuses as to, oh, it's just because of them, or just because of my circumstances, or just because of that, rather than taking full ownership of where we're at? Because we're where we're at because of our decisions and beliefs. And if we own that, that's when we can start intentionally creating. And if we can be honest with ourselves, that's when we can start making decisions. For example, some things that are very hard to own, and I look at, even in my life, like it was very hard for me to own in my previous relationship that I don't like my marriage and the patterns we're in. Like that took decades probably to own that I don't like the pattern and this is not healthy for me. I'm, owning things like I'm in a pattern of self-depreciation. I'm not kind to myself rather than self-appreciation. Or owning like, hey, my job feels soul-sucking and I don't like it. Or I'm holding on to a friendship that brings me down. Or I'm doing something that I know is not good for me. Things like that, just owning it. And, or like, hey, I'm doing something out of obligation rather than honesty. And, just kind of looking at that. And really, I'm just trying to build a community of honest, growth-minded people that love and care for others. I'm trying to build a community of empowered women and an empowered kindness rather than an overly kindness that is self-depreciating doormat and has a belief system that's hurting herself or hurting myself and where I used to be. So that's what my community is about owning, living intentionally, and living brighter. And so basically, just looking at those 4 things, I want to just take a pause and kind of see where you land on some of these things. So again, the 4 things I learned from Ariel in her example was to live life to the fullest. Are we appreciating the joys? Are we being present? Are we working through our pain? And if something's flagged for you, I just want you to write that down and make a note of it, because that's where your work's at and that's where my work is at and what comes up for me. And second, live a life of love. Is there somebody you need to go deeper into forgiveness, a deeper layer of forgiveness? Again, you don't have to choose to have people like in your inner circle. We get to choose who we want, but our hearts can be open. And is there another layer of forgiveness so you can live a life of more love? Number 3, are you living in a life of congruence of who you are? Are you able to be honest with others about what you think, feel, desire, and want? Or are you pleasing others? And then number 4, is there something in your life you're not owning fully, a decision where you're at, a non-decision? Is there something that comes up? Write those things down and then take it to the bark notebook practice. That is so important. And again, that's where I feel my feelings, and that's where I barf it out, sort it out, plan it out. And you can go on my website at livebrighter.info and you can download the barf notebook practice. But that practice has really helped me feel my feelings and been a huge practice in going throughout my life. And it's been a huge practice with my grieving as the loss of Ariel, and just having that ability to feel my feelings and process through my pain. So go ahead and barf it out, sort it out. And again, God never wastes a death, or Ariel's death. And it was beautiful to see her funeral and how many people were touched. And he never wants us to waste our lives. And that's why we have this community, so we can support each other and live brighter 1% at a time. Make it a great day. Stay tuned for our next episode.